In this video tutorial, we will be discussing about the Los Angeles abrasion test. The Los Angeles abrasion test is done on the equipment as shown on the slide in front of you. This is the equipment which is used to perform the rolling action of aggregate along with steel charges, which are being shown on the screen right now. Maximum number of steel charges in each test are 12, but they can be varied according to the change in specification of the test which you are performing. Los Angeles abrasion test is done to evaluate the hardness criteria. Since I told you in experiment 2 that there are 4 quality criteria which are evaluated, so Los Angeles abrasion test is done to evaluate the hardness criteria, because when aggregate is placed in a pavement, the frictional effects of the tire of the vehicle passing on the pavement as well as the friction of the aggregate amongst itself, as aggregate will be interlocked amongst each other. So, the friction of these forces will cause the aggregate to wear and tear. So, to measure the resistance of this wear and tear, or this what do you call it, the friction, we perform this test. It is done on either small sized coarse aggregate or large sized coarse aggregate. A large sized coarse aggregate consists of aggregates larger than 2-inch size. So, we will be performing the test on small sized coarse aggregate, and the only difference between these two types of tests is that either we perform in small sized coarse aggregate, we perform the test with 500 revolutions, and the gradation specifications are different. Whereas for large size coarse aggregate, we perform the rotation for 100 revolutions. That is, the Los Angeles abrasion equipment rotates for 100 revolutions, 1000 revolutions. I'm sorry, 1000 revolutions, and 500 revolutions for small sized coarse aggregate. Now, although we have performed the lab 2, which is the impact value test, but ASTM has stated that the falling of the aggregate when the drum is rolling, the aggregate falls within the drum, and it also undergoes some frictional forces due to the presence of steel charges. So, the falling of the aggregate does simulate the impact effect of the impact value test, and therefore, we do not necessarily need the impact value test. That was done just for the learning purpose, and one of the quality criteria which used to be used, which is still in effect, that is the toughness criteria is still being used, but during some quality tests of aggregate, the impact value test is not included. Now, on to the test procedure. As you can see in the slide in front of you, we have various sieve openings mentioned on the left side of the table, against which there are some weights in grams which are mentioned against each column of A, B, C and D. If you observe that if you look closely, each of these columns have a total of 5000 grams of weight. And that is what we have to do in the Los Angeles abrasion test. We have to accumulate 5 kilograms of aggregate and then subject it to the Los Angeles abrasion test with the steel charges as mentioned against each type of classification or specification, which is, if you use classification A, then you have to use 12 steel charges. Similarly, for B, you have to use 11. For C, you have to use 8, and for D, you have to use 6. Now, the accumulation of the 5 kilograms of aggregate is dependent upon the type of specification that you use. If you use specification A, then you have to acquire the 5000 grams of aggregate according to this criteria. That is, 1250 grams should be in between half inch and 1 inch, and similarly another 1250 between 1 inch and 3/4, another between 3/4 and half, and the last 1250 between half inch sieve size and 3 by 8 inch size. And for same for specification B, against the sizes mentioned to you, you have to accumulate that amount in weight of aggregate. The selection of these specifications is dependent upon the size available in your sample. If during sampling and during the initial sieving I observe or you observe that you do not have the size 1 inch pass and 3 by 4 inch retain, an ample quantity of this size. If let's say only 250 grams of this size was accumulated, then you will not be able to use specification A. You will have to use specification B or any of the other two, dependent upon if those sizes of aggregate are available in your sample. And once you select your your specification in according to which you are to perform the test, then you stick to that specification and you accumulate that amount of aggregate. For instance, if I say that I performed a preliminary examination of the sample and found out that there is ample size of 3 by 8 inch pass and 1 by 4 inch retain material, as well as 1 by 4 pass and number 4 inch material. So what I will do is I will select specification C. I will collect 2500 grams of each of these sieves, and then I will use the 5000 grams of aggregate, place it in the Los Angeles abrasion drum, and along with 8 abrasion charges or steel charges, and rotate the drum for 500 revolutions. After it is done, we take out the sample as well as the charges from the Los Angeles abrasion drum, pass it through sieve number 12, and see whether what quantity of material is now broken enough to pass through sieve number 12. So, and with that quantity we calculate the Los Angeles abrasion percentage. Now this percentage is compared against some specifications against which you are to place that aggregate in the pavement. If we have a Los Angeles abrasion percentage of less than 40%, then it is good enough to be used in the base course of any road. Similarly, if you want to use it in wearing course, then it has to be less than 30%. Now on to the test procedure.